When generals banned his skeleton machine, did they make a mistake? In early 1944, deep within the forests of northern France, Allied commanders faced a growing problem. German forces had constructed a series of hidden V-weapon supply facilities scattered across the countryside. These sites were heavily guarded, camouflaged, and positioned far beyond the reach of conventional armored assaults. Standard tanks struggled in the thick mud and narrow woodland paths. Infantry attacks had already suffered heavy casualties. But somewhere in an American experimental motor pool sat a machine most officers had already dismissed. A strange vehicle, light, exposed, almost skeletal in design. Many generals believed it had no place on a battlefield. Yet within weeks, that very machine would smash through one of the most secret German installations in the region, a base hidden so well that Allied intelligence barely knew it existed. And the officer who insisted on building it was about to prove everyone wrong. This is the story of the moment when a banned experimental machine, nicknamed the Skeleton Mod, changed the outcome of a mission no one thought possible. Before we start, please subscribe to our channel as we continue to bring these forgotten chapters of history back to life. The man behind the controversial vehicle was Captain Robert H. Ritchie, an American engineer assigned to the U.S. Army Ordnance Department attached to the 9th Armored Division. Ritchie was not a typical officer. Before the war, he had worked as a mechanical engineer specializing in lightweight vehicle structures. He believed that traditional armored doctrine, thick steel, heavy engines, and slow movement, was becoming outdated. His idea was radical. Instead of building heavier tanks, he wanted to build lighter ones. Machines that could move where enemy armor could not. Machines that could slip through forests, across marshland, and over fragile bridges. The prototype he developed in late 1943 looked nothing like a conventional tank. Its frame consisted of a lightweight tubular chassis, almost like the bones of an aircraft structure. Armor plating was minimal, only protecting the engine and crew compartment. The vehicle weighed barely 7 tons, less than half the weight of a standard M4 Sherman. Mounted on the front was a 37mm cannon, similar to the weapon used on the M3 Stuart, but its greatest strength was speed. On open terrain, it could reach 50 miles per hour, and in forests, where heavy tanks crawled, it could weave between trees like a scout car. Yet when Ritchie presented the prototype to senior officers in early 1944, their reaction was immediate. They rejected it. The exposed frame looked fragile, the armor was thin, the design appeared too experimental for combat deployment. Several generals labeled the machine a skeleton of a tank. The nickname stuck, and soon after, the project was officially shelved. But Ritchie refused to give up, because by that point, intelligence officers had begun reporting something troubling. Deep inside the forests near Calais, German forces were building hidden installations connected to the development and storage of V-1 flying bomb systems. These facilities were hidden beneath thick woodland and protected by minefields and anti-tank barriers. Conventional armored assaults had repeatedly failed to reach them, and the narrow woodland tracks meant heavy tanks simply couldn't get close enough. The Allies needed something else, something smaller, something faster, something that could slip past defenses where normal armor could not. But by the time commanders realized that, the Skeleton Mod had already been banned. By June 1944, Allied forces were advancing rapidly after the landings on D-Day. Yet the forests north of Amiens remained dangerous territory. German units had established a concealed logistical network supplying V-weapon launch sites. One of the most heavily protected areas lay near a small village surrounded by dense woodland. Reconnaissance aircraft suspected a hidden ammunition depot there, but ground assaults had repeatedly failed to reach it. The terrain was the enemy. Thick mud, narrow paths, dense tree cover. Standard armored vehicles could not maneuver through it. On July 17, 1944, reconnaissance units from the 9th Armored Division reported movement in the forest. German trucks, fuel convoys, artillery shipments. Something important was hidden inside. At 1400 hours, Allied command ordered a reconnaissance force forward. The lead vehicles were M8 Greyhound armored cars. Within 20 minutes, the patrol hit the first minefield. 2 vehicles were disabled instantly. Then came the machine gun fire. German defensive positions had been carefully prepared along the forest road. The patrol was forced to withdraw. It became clear that any attempt to reach the suspected base with normal vehicles would lead to heavy losses, and time was running out. Intelligence reports warned that the Germans were preparing to move large quantities of V-weapon components out of the area. If the base wasn't destroyed soon, the equipment could disappear deeper into occupied territory. At this point, Captain Ritchie approached his commanding officer with a bold suggestion. Use the skeleton vehicle. The reaction was immediate resistance. Generals had already rejected the design, but Ritchie argued something simple. His machine could travel where no tank could go. Narrow forest trails, soft ground, hidden routes. If a small team could slip through the woods unnoticed, they might reach the base before German defenses reacted. The idea seemed risky, almost reckless. But the situation left few alternatives. Finally, a compromise was reached. One prototype, a three-man crew, a reconnaissance mission only. If the machine failed, the project would be permanently shut down. And if it succeeded, it might open a path straight into the heart of the enemy's hidden network. The mission began shortly after midnight on July 21, 1944. The skeleton vehicle rolled quietly out of the motor pool under minimal lighting. Its crew consisted of Captain Robert Ritchie as commander, Sergeant Daniel Walker as gunner, and Corporal Luis Ramirez as driver. The thin frame rattled softly as the engine started. Even the men themselves weren't sure the machine would survive combat. Yet as they entered the forest roads, something remarkable happened. The lightweight vehicle moved effortlessly through terrain that had trapped heavier machines. Tree branches scraped across the exposed frame, mud splashed against the wheels, but the vehicle kept moving. For nearly 2 hours, they advanced deeper into the forest. At 0230 hours, they reached the outer perimeter of the suspected German facility. Through the trees, they could see dim lights, fuel trucks, ammo crates, guard towers, and what looked like a heavily camouflaged bunker complex. The reconnaissance mission was supposed to end there. They had confirmed the base existed. Now they were meant to withdraw and report the coordinates. But as Ritchie studied the scene through binoculars, he realized something. The entire depot was packed with fuel and munitions. If the right target was hit, the entire complex might explode. But the problem was obvious. 3 men, 1 lightly armored vehicle, against a fortified base guarded by dozens of German soldiers. Then suddenly, a spotlight swept across the forest. German sentries had spotted movement. Machine guns opened fire. Tracer rounds ripped through the trees. The skeleton vehicle's thin armor offered almost no protection. Branches shattered, bullets sparked off the metal frame. The crew had seconds to react. Retreat meant driving straight into open ground under enemy fire. But pushing forward meant driving directly into the base. Captain Ritchie made a decision that would define the mission. He ordered the driver forward, full speed, straight toward the depot. The skeleton vehicle burst from the tree line at nearly 40 miles per hour. German soldiers were caught completely off guard. The strange machine barely looked like a tank. Its thin frame and narrow profile confused the defenders. For a moment, they hesitated. That hesitation was everything. Sergeant Walker fired the 37mm cannon directly into a row of fuel trucks. The shell struck the first vehicle. A second later, flames erupted. Fuel ignited instantly. Within seconds, the fire spread to nearby ammunition crates. German soldiers scrambled in panic. Machine guns opened fire again. But the skeleton vehicle was already weaving through the depot. Ramirez drove the machine in tight turns between supply stacks. Walker fired shell after shell into the fuel storage area. Then it happened. One round struck a massive fuel container positioned beside the main bunker entrance. The explosion was enormous. A towering fireball shot into the night sky. Shockwaves rattled the forest for miles. Crates of ammunition detonated one after another. The entire supply depot began exploding in a chain reaction. German soldiers fled the compound. Some tried to fire at the escaping vehicle, but the skeleton machine had already accelerated back toward the forest. Behind them, the base was engulfed in flames. By dawn, reconnaissance aircraft confirmed the result. The entire facility had been destroyed. Fuel depots, supply bunkers, V-weapon components, all gone. What began as a reconnaissance mission had turned into a devastating strike, and it had been carried out by a machine generals once called useless. When the crew returned to Allied lines that morning, commanders could barely believe the reports. Reconnaissance flights later confirmed the scale of destruction. The German base had been completely wiped out. Explosions burned for nearly 6 hours after the attack. Intelligence officers later concluded that the depot had been supplying several V-1 flying bomb launch facilities across northern France. Destroying it delayed multiple planned attacks against Allied positions. Captain Robert Ritchie was later awarded the Silver Star for his actions. His crew received the Bronze Star Medal. More importantly, the success forced Army engineers to reconsider lightweight armored designs. The skeleton prototype itself never entered mass production. But the lessons learned from the mission influenced later reconnaissance vehicle development. Sometimes the most unconventional ideas can achieve the impossible. And sometimes the machine everyone dismisses is exactly the one that changes the course of battle. This was just one of countless untold stories from the Second World War. Subscribe to our channel as we continue to bring these forgotten chapters of history back to life.